Well, hello everyone. Welcome again to Courageous Conversations. My name is Ken Frood. I am now the retired minister of St. Brice-Kirk. In the conversation, as usual, is Justin Taylor, who is the present minister of Abbots Hall. And tonight we are both delighted to be joined by Gillian Patterson, who is the present minister of Wellesley along at Methil. We're all here in Fife, but presumably people watching this will be from a wider geographical spread. So here we are on a snowy night, and we're just looking forward to having a chat together. We've got some theme in mind, Justin.
Yeah. Firstly, can I just say it's just fantastic having Gillian here, because I hold Gillian in high esteem. I think she's a fantastic, not just minister, but person, and an inspiration in so many ways. And I hope that as you hear from her and hear her context and her story, that it sort of sparks something within you. Gillian works in a priority area, and for those people who don't know what that is, it's just an area in the Scottish society where poverty is quite rough. That comes with a lot of issues related to poverty. And so the topic tonight we'll be focusing really about is what poverty, or what people from a context of poverty have to teach us, the rest, the wealthy of the world, especially as we learn of like Jeff Bezos making how many more billions for Amazon this year, and the wealth, just skyrocketing for certain individuals. What do the poor have to teach the middle and the upper class of society? Or
Could I start off by asking Gillian, what was it that drew you to that kind of area? Why do you feel your heart is there, and what would you be hoping to bring to that particular area as opposed to a more affluent area?
Well, when I was doing my probation, which is now 11 years ago, because I've been in Methil now for just over 10 years, I did my probation quite nearby, and often when I was driving home at night, I would end up trying different roads just for a change of scenery. And I kept being drawn down to Methil and driving through there. And yes, it's the 7th poorest parish in Scotland. There is a lot of deprivation here, very high levels of poverty. If you look at the Scottish indicators for deprivation, we score very highly. I've always wanted to be the top of the hit parade for something, but I never realised it would be because of poverty and deprivation. But what drew me to Methil was because I knew some of the people. I'd met them. I'd got to know them. I'd heard their story. I'd journeyed with them. In my previous job within the church, I'd gone and done a stewardship programme with them. And I'd seen the dedication. I'd seen the commitment. These folk put heart and soul into everything. We maybe don't have loads of professional people, with very high-powered jobs. Everybody had been really hard workers, hard manual workers and things like that. And they just gave the church their all. I've got a wonderful group of people who can bake for Scotland, can cook, can clean, can fix and mend, and you name it. And I just loved that about people. And they were just really, really good folk, and that they had their faith at the heart of everything they were doing. And when I started then to look at churches, what really drew me to them was the Methil Parish Church, as it was then, and there were 2 churches in Methil. They had been vacant for nearly 9 years at that point. They'd been a long time without a minister, but they had never, ever got downhearted. They had kept going, kept chuntering on, as somebody said to me. And they had actually been brave enough to say no to previous applicants. And I really admired that. Wow. That they were prepared to say no. And that I remember one of the people on the vacancy committee saying to me, you know, we would rather wait longer and have the right person than make a mistake. And I had felt continually drawn down to Methil through almost a year before I applied. I had congregations who were approaching me, asking me to apply for their church, and it just didn't feel right. And it was definitely, for me, it was the people. It wasn't the building, it wasn't it, it was just the people were just such great folk, and they really wanted to work and they wanted to do things well. And, you know, 10 years on, some great things have happened and we've connected with our community, and that for me was what I felt called here to do. That was the most important thing for me.
And so, like, what were some of the preconceived ideas you had about an area like Methil, and how has that changed, or how has, you know, how has those views evolved over the time that you've had with them?
Well, do you know, when I came here, I realised that there was a lot of deprivation, and I realised that there wasn't a lot of money around, and I knew we would have to work hard. I knew that money was always going to be an issue. We didn't have a high income in the church, that kind of thing. So I knew that we'd have to work hard. But what I'd underestimated was the passion that was here. Because to keep going through a vacancy of 9 years and come out the other end of that the way that they had, it became abundantly clear to me within a few weeks and months, actually, that here were folk that really wanted to move forward, and they encouraged me in everything that I did, everything I suggested. There was very little in youth or young people, and they encouraged me with the ideas that I had. One of the first things I did was started an after school club in the primary school, because it was a way of making connections with the young people and their parents. And, well, apart from this past year, because of lockdown, you know, we regularly have 45 to 50 kids a week coming to our after school club, which is basically what a lot of folk would know as Sunday school, but on a Wednesday afternoon after school. And that runs in the school. I spend a lot of time in there, and also in Leavenmouth Academy, making the connections there. But really, for a community like this, it's just about being out there and being available, and just journeying with people, listening to them, empathizing, but not sympathizing, because there's a big difference. Assisting and helping, but not patronizing. And just being part of the community. I walk a lot around the parish, just walk and talk to people, do most of my shopping in the local shops, because it's a great way of talking to folk. And I learned very early on just to be me. I never ever have introduced myself as the minister or Mrs. Patterson. I've been Gillian from the day I arrived here, because that's just me. I'm not a great one for titles and things. And even the school completely got that. I said I'd like to be known as Gillian rather than Mrs. Patterson. And so, you know, for me, one of the best things is a young couple that came to see me because they remembered me from Kirkland High School, coming in there, being their chaplain. They're going to get married, so they remembered me and came along. That makes me feel old, you see, because kids at school. Now, Ken, you're bound to have seen more than one generation do that kind of thing to you.
Yes. Yes.
But I now know I'm getting old, because youngsters that I knew want to come to the church to be married. But that's great. I love that. That's wonderful.
You talked about serving and looking, you know, being alongside people, Gillian, and I know, you know, your kind of community element to what you do is really important. And you know, there's a church culture which we kind of know, and which is has got some common features across the country, not necessarily uniform, but at least similarities. But
Yeah.
the culture outside the church can be very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe in some places that's even more extreme. And I'm just thinking about how a church, which is often perceived to be a middle class and somewhat dated and traditional institution, you have a traditional looking church building.
Yeah.
Although there's something else happening as well. We'll come to that. But and yet, the community in which it's placed could have a very different kind of life, very different kind of values, pressures, and I know you have a lot of funerals, and I know a lot of these, more than most people in terms of parish ministry. And a lot of that will be because people identify you as somebody that they can relate to. And I would like you just to comment on that.
Yeah, one of the first phone call I got the morning after my ordination, 9 o'clock in the morning, it was from a funeral director, and that was really the start of. It dawned on me very quickly that it was a great way to get to know people, and spending a couple of hours, as we all do, talking to people, learning about their loved one, taking the service, doing some follow-up with them afterwards, all these kinds of things, in all sorts of situations, because a lot of the funerals here are can be related to addiction, drugs, drink. Sadly here, in the last 5 years in particular, the amount of young suicides. But one of the privileges of ministry, when you can get alongside people in those situations, you begin to understand what makes them tick. And there's a real pride in a community like this, being able to give their husband, wife, son, daughter, whoever, the kind of send-off they want to give them. And not being able to do that sometimes, and how painful that is.
Yeah.
Because particularly if something's happened suddenly, and what I've discovered is not many people have savings here. They don't plan ahead always, because they're living week to week, month to month. And so if you can't put money aside, it then does become an issue of pride. And I've sat with many family who are mortified that they can't pay for what they would like. And if there's one thing about Methil, the community spirit had disappeared because of the unemployment and all the things that had gone by the by. And people missed that. And the same thing, when there was a funeral taking place in the community, at one time they would have all turned out for that, and that had disappeared too, because people couldn't afford things. And actually over the last year, with the restrictions, people now line the streets like they used to.
Oh, really?
And all these kind of things, the old traditions are actually inherent, they're in there somewhere. But I think when you get alongside a community and you understand them, and you understand that we don't do things in a patronising way, we do them in an assisting and helpful way. And also, for a lot of the families here, there's a straight choice sometimes between heating their home or putting food on the table. And that's one of the reasons that myself and a few others got the food bank up and running. It's nearly 7 years ago now. Because a lot of people, if you're hungry, you can't do anything else. That's what your focus is, completely on that. And I think what people have liked is that we've provided practical help. We've helped them with the immediate need, but we've also listened to them. We've looked them in the eye, and we've had chats with them and cups of tea with them and talked to them and listened to why they've got the problems they've got. Because usually if there's an addiction, there's a reason.
Yeah.
And if you actually listen to what the reason is, then you get to the heart of the issue. And I've always felt that my ministry was a listening one. just getting alongside folk. I drink an awful lot of tea, Ken. Just listening. But actually,
I'm glad that sentence ended with the word tea.
I better not let on.
I think what you're saying is really interesting, Gillian, in terms of just the idea of like, for many people, they're not seen.
Mm-hmm.
You know, for many people, especially I think in areas of poverty, they're a project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're an issue, a statistic.
Mm-hmm.
And then when somebody comes in and says, I see you,
mm-hmm.
and not only do I see you, I value you and I value your story and where you're from.
Mm-hmm.
I think it, you know, it really changes people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even just thinking now, like we have a lot of preconceived ideas of what of people who are in poverty and what they look like. You know, like one of the things you said that your community really works hard, but that's contrary to the myth that
yes.
You know, people who are poor don't work hard.
Yeah.
You know, there's that myth that you know, and some of the low-paying jobs, some of these hard, heavy labor jobs, those are hard work, and we overlook the people like it because the myth or the stereotype of these people are like that. Actually, you know, it doesn't see them as individuals. It doesn't see their stories. It actually robs them of their dignity.
That's right. That's right.
And sometimes people will have several jobs, you know,
yes.
particularly you know if it's like your part-time work. But I came across this in my own ministry, and I certainly came across it listening to the stories of a family who were talking about, say, an elderly mother, you know, who brought them up and, you know, was up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and she went to the school, and then she went to a cafe, and then she, you know, it was just constant. And you just think, how on earth did these people have the energy to cope with children and all of that, just with amazing resourcefulness and huge stamina.
And you know, one of the things I think, again, going back to funerals, when you're listening to people's stories and you hear what they gave up so that their kids could have opportunities, and I hear that, you know, Dad was maybe a miner, because obviously there's a lot of people worked in the mines round about here. But in Methil, there was the mines, there was the steel industry, there was the brickworks, there was all the associated things that went with that, the industrial work. There was the docks. At one time, Methil had the busiest docks in Europe. You know, numerous things going in and out of the docks every day. And then the mines closed, the brickworks closed, the steel work, you know, and it's just, everything began to disappear. And people then had to travel for work if they wanted to work at all. Some just couldn't get, they were at an age where it was very, very difficult then to get employment. And I think what happened then was this sense of disappointment of they'd let their families down because they wanted to provide for their families, and they wanted their families to have more than they did. And I see that with young families now. You know, one of the blights in this area are 0-hour contracts, which will be the same in all parts of the country. And although a lot of them have been furloughed, a lot of people on 0-hour contracts just had no income because they were on a 0-hour contract. And things like that in an area of poverty has a massive effect, because it is about your dignity and your self-esteem. And young men who've never been able to work have no self-esteem whatsoever. They have nothing they feel that they're good at. And so some of the projects that we've done and are going to do is about building people up, just giving them the confidence to even apply for something. And once you're into the benefit system, it's very hard to break out of it.
Yeah, it's a trap, isn't it?
Yeah, and you get very locked in without realising it. And that's why drink and drugs, combination of both. Gambling is another problem here. Scratch cards, I think, are the worst thing that were ever invented. People that spend maybe £50 on scratch cards and they win £10, but instead of keeping that 10, they spend that 10 as well because they think that'll be the next big win. But if you've no self-esteem, if you've no motivation, because people have been telling you for years that you're worth nothing, and all of that combines, you can understand why actually, the hit of the alcohol or the drugs or the scratch card or going into the bookies, you can understand. I can see why it happens. And I've just heard so many stories over the years. They've got a very familiar theme to them now. And the only thing I ever want to do is just to say you're worth more than that. But the important thing for me is looking at people so that they see that you actually are listening to them and that you're not talking over the top of their head.
I think it's really difficult too in a modern, with all the modern media, and I say modern, and this has been true really since the age of television, but more and more people can see into the life and lifestyles of these fictional characters that they see on television and films, and they see a whole different world, which they know is not their world. We don't have the 2 cars and we don't have a speedboat to go water skiing at the weekend, and we're not jetting off to here, there, and everywhere. And there's an affluence and an easy kind of consumerism portrayed, which it's a stark contrast. There's an injustice at the heart of it all that says, well, why not me? I mean, there must be a chip on the shoulder, understandably, for people who've not ever had the prospect of anything like that kind of lifestyle. That's
right. Our youth fellowship are brilliant. If ever we speak about different things, and I remember asking them once, who is your role model? And I was just, well, of course, I then showed my age because some of them I didn't know who they were talking about. But anyway, I mean, they educated me in that, as they always do. We've got a great bunch of young people, and I miss them because of lockdown. But they can tell you that the kind of people they want to be like, the people they aspire to be, the boys want to be footballers of all different teams, and they'll name different folk. And the girls will speak about various folk. Sometimes it's a pop singer or an actress, but quite a few of them will tell you they want to be, because they're a similar age, to people like Greta Thunberg, because they aspire to be like these folk. They want to change the world. They want to make a difference. And partly that's because the school here is encouraging them to aspire to be something. We've got a fantastic head teacher here who was at Kirkland High School and then moved to Leavenmouth Academy. And he passionately believes in this community as well, and always says, you can achieve, you can be something. But for a couple of generations worth, people in Methil were told they weren't worth anything. I mean, God bless them. I love the Proclaimers. But I mean, that song, Methil No More, didn't do us many favours. But we'd rather walk 500 miles with them than get Methil No More sung to us, you see. But that song's true though. There was nothing left.
So one of the things, going back sort of to the myth thing, is one of the things I think is the wealthy communities think that poor people need to be saved. We've got this thing of like, we've got this thing is like, even in the developing and the third world country kind of thing, is that, this is what we have. And so our object is to get people to there. It's never to bring people, for us to drop our way of living so that other people, there's a balance. I think that the poor have a gift, and I think this is why Jesus hung around with people who are poor. And even in the Muslim tradition, the reason people celebrate Ramadan is so that they identify with the poor, with the starving, with the hungry, so that once you felt the pain of hunger in your own stomach, you live differently.
Yes.
So Ramadan is actually a recalibrating of your value system.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the poor have tremendous gifts to teach to the wealthy of this world. One thing in South Africa is you can walk into a poor community, but you'd always find joy.
Yes.
Joy was just overflowing from the place, no matter if there was, and generosity, people shared. And I think in wealthy communities, we don't know what that's like. We're addicted. We might not addicted to the next shot of whatever's in our arm, but our addiction is to our bank accounts and to our security, and to our pension pots and all that kind of stuff. We're addicted in different ways. So
what do you think about Justin? Sorry to butt in, Justin. I'm just thinking about the effect of COVID and the lockdown and the economic collapse that's happening in hitherto prosperous economies. And we've all been looking at America. I mean, who's not been transfixed by the political pantomime of the last 2 or 3 months? But when you look at this country that has emphasized independence and the pioneering spirit and you can achieve anything and has always kind of regarded poor people as being somewhat to blame for their poverty, and now you've got people whole communities that have been economically not just viable but prosperous, and tens of thousands of people without job, and just all of a sudden a transformation of what is this thing called community. Before we weren't interested, but now we need community. Now we need helping communities, whatever charity or church or whatever neighborhood or community group. And I just wonder if that will change people's outlook. And for the churches in America, it's true here, but I just see it slightly more polarized and stark in America. Then I wonder if they will then begin to realize, actually, we've missed a trick here. Some of them, not all of them. I mean, there's a lot of social care and concern in American churches, but nonetheless, it's some of it times it's been a bit lacking. Yeah,
I also think, carrying on a little bit from that, is Russell Brand has this lovely kind of analogy, which is quite true in some ways. He talks about the problem of low-hanging fruit. He says when there's an issue in society, you always go for the lowest hanging fruit. So it must be the immigrants. It must be these other people that are coming, these vulnerable people. And we attack the bottom instead of going, actually, what's actually happening at the top? Like Amazon hasn't paid taxes for, proper, all these people. And we don't go for those. We don't say these people, we say, they contribute to the economy, but we just go for the low hanging fruit. And so we bash the bottom end of the poor, and we set them against each other. We set the Polish, I saw this in this country, we set Polish people against people who are on benefits and are struggling, almost, against each other. They're taking our jobs and stuff like that. And it's just, it's this kind of divisive thing. Anyway, that was a side tangent a little bit. But Gillian, what do you, we have a very little time left, but what do you wish people would know about poor? What do you think the poor have to teach the rich in the world?
I think the generosity that I see in this community and in my congregation astounds me. I think the people who have the least give the most. Yeah. For example, we had a toy appeal, toys and clothing appeal. Now, we've done it for years and we've always had a fabulous response. But this year was just absolutely humbling. I have never seen a response like it. There were hundreds of toys, literally hundreds, and so much food to help. And, some of the people that were dropping stuff off at the manse to me literally were giving away their own things to help somebody who might have less than them. And I think when you've got very little, you appreciate everything you have. And therefore, you're very generous with what you give. I remember us doing backpacks for Mary's Meals and filling about 170 backpacks full of stuff. It was a Lent challenge to fill them. And, a congregation of our size and income, and people just gave for the 6 weeks of Lent, and we were astonished at what came in. And I think sometimes the appreciation that this kind of community has for each other and support they give each other. And one of the things we did was to bring the Methil Gala back here. We did that about 5 years ago. And that was because we wanted to rebuild that community feel and spirit. And they're terrific days. 1,000 people there, and people having good fun and enjoying themselves. And yes, some of the stalls make money, but it's not a money maker. It's about being together and appreciating each other and having a bit of fun. And kids are involved in all sorts of things. And I think that's what a lot of what I would term more affluent communities have lost. A little bit of staying within their own home and not really mixing and being with other people. And our community had lost that a bit too, with all the issues and difficulties, but actually the neighbourliness, the kindness, the friendship, particularly in this last year, what we've experienced in this past year has just been phenomenal. And it's a privilege to see it. And it's wonderful to see it because people actually really care about each other, because they understand what it's like to have nothing in the cupboard and can I put my heating on, and they understand that the person across the street is going to be in the same situation as them. There's no keeping up with the Joneses here for the size of car and things like that. And for me, that's a huge blessing. And it is an honour.
But through your ministry, through you and the people that you've empowered and led, clearly, you've put the church at the centre of that community and helped to rebuild community spirit in a way that doesn't build barriers. You can only come in here if you believe X, Y, or Z. You've got to have some kind of spiritual experience or some kind of brain understanding of teaching. That's not about it. It's not about that at all, is it? And of course, you've got this fantastic project, a brand new facility, almost complete, which I just saw the other day. It's fabulous. Yeah. So you've high hopes for that. Obviously, great hopes for that too.
Well, we started this 8 years ago. We knew that our current church hall was past its sell-by date. We needed something bigger, better, modern, flexible. We had so many things happening. We were competing for time in the one hall. So yes, we've got this marvellous, the Wellesley Centre, that's just getting finished off. And it's going to be for the community. And everything we run out of that is going to be for the community. There's going to be mental health support there. There's going to be bereavement support for adults and children. There's going to be all sorts of support groups addressing the needs that are here, like a prisoner's family support group is going to start. All these kinds of things are what the community needs, and our vision for it is that that's a centre open 7 days a week. People can come in and out, there'll be friendship there, there'll be fellowship there, a wee caffee's going to run, so there'll always be somebody, and it come back to what I said at the start, there'll always be somebody there to listen and to talk, because that's the kind of ministry that we've got, and we're good at talking in Methil.
That's brilliant.
I wish some ways I was Catholic at this point, because I'd call you Saint Gillian of Methil. But
Saint Justin has a ring to it.
It does.
Yeah.
However,
But I feel like a martyr.
however inappropriate that would be in present circumstances.
No, but I feel like a martyr for my cause, so you can just call me Justin Martyr. For anyone who doesn't know, that's a historical person. Anyway, Gillian, thank you so much for spending time with us, for being our prophet, you know, and I really do mean this. I really believe that the work you're doing is the future of the church. It's the future of just community, you know, like where we start seeing each other not as projects, not as things to be changed, but as people. I think we've lost that. And you are ushering a new dawn of that. And I do think that you're on the cutting edge of that. And so I'm privileged, and I know Ken is privileged to call you a friend. But thank you for inspiring us. And thank you. And thank you for taking time to just have a chat with us. And yeah, we look forward to the opening of that new centre and all that it will bring to the community.
Oh, very excited.
If I could add one kind of little biblical tailpiece, I remember Jim Wallace, who founded Sojourners in America, an American teacher and minister, tells the story of when he was a student going through the Bible and cutting out and numbering and cutting out all the texts that referred to the passages that referred to money or to poverty or to social injustice. And finding thousands of verses that were related to that. And in fact, only one other topic was more often mentioned, and that was idolatry in some shape or form. So, you know, and the number of times that Jesus talks about it, you know, talks about that more than any other topic at all. And, you know, if you listen to what some Christians have banged on about over the years, you would never guess that that's what Jesus was most concerned about. So it's a thoroughly Christocentric view of life and ministry and faith.
Yeah, very much so.
So, good. Friends, thank you so much for joining us. We'll hopefully be back in 2 weeks' time, and we'll be discussing another topic. Please like and share if you can, and thank you again for joining us.